He woke up that morning to a very strange bright light. Gideon looked around and he realized that he was sleeping on the threshing floor of his barn, and the first thing that went through his mind was, uh-oh, when I get home, I'm really going to be in trouble from my family. Wonder what my wife is going to think about this. But then he rubbed his eyes and he saw the light keep getting brighter and brighter and brighter. He looked around. Oh, this is strange. It's not even morning yet. I still have a couple hours that I could go back to sleep. Maybe if I put my head under this pile of hay, that light will go away. Tried that and light kept getting brighter. Next thing he heard was, "Gideon, warrior of God." Excuse me? Are you talking to me? I'm no warrior. I'm just a simple farmer. Obviously you can't be talking to me. Then the next thing he heard is, "Gideon, get up." Okay, if you insist, I'll get up. Gideon got up and brushed the hay off his clothes and the hay out of his hair, laughing to himself that it happened again for sure, and hopefully this was just a dream. As he turned around, he saw where this bright light was coming from, and the moment that he saw the face, he fell straight on his knees and straight on his face because he knew that he was in the presence of God. And not only was it the presence of God, it was Jesus himself. Next thing he felt on his shoulder was a soft touch, and Gideon stood up once again. And he looked into the face of Jesus and he said, "Lord, what have I done? What do you want?" And Jesus looked at him and said, "I've got a very special thing that I'm wanting you to do." The nation of Israel is in a lot of trouble right now, and I want you to go out. I want you to choose people to fight my battle for me, to protect your land, to protect your future, and to make sure that these people are driven out finally. Gideon was very skeptical. He'd been skeptical from the very beginning. You ask his parents, they would tell you that. But this time, Gideon had something else going through his mind. So he looked at Jesus and said, "Well, Lord, if this is really what you want me to do, here's what I want you to do for me." So Gideon gave some conditions, and all he heard was Jesus laughing, and then all of a sudden, there was no light there. Gideon looked around, and still dark outside, and he said, "Well, maybe this was actually a dream. Sure seemed real. Sure felt real." Gideon went back to sleep, and next thing he knew wasn't just that the light was streaming through the barn door, but one of his children was shaking him awake, telling him that Mom had breakfast ready. And he knew what his wife cooked. He was so eager to go and have breakfast with his family. Gideon got up and went outside, and he saw a fleece that had been laid there. And all of a sudden he realized that this was not a dream. What had seemed to be a dream was extremely real. But he kind of just pushed that aside from his thinking and went to have breakfast, and then started his day once again. Trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't me that God called. Maybe it was just something I ate. Yeah, that's it. It was something I ate last night, and I dreamed the whole thing. Man, I'm having some bad dreams. I better make sure I don't eat so much and so late anymore. Gideon went through that day, and got everything done. But the same problem that happened the night before happened again. He was taking hay into the barn, and as he was taking it, he said, well, if I just sit here for a few moments, it's okay, I can go home. And nope, next thing Gideon knew, that light shone in the barn again. He's like, I didn't eat late, I know this is not a dream. He heard his name being called again, being called a warrior of God. He turned around and he saw Jesus once again. Same conversation, different stipulations. Gideon thought again, well, maybe this is a dream, I'll go back to sleep. And as he was about to go back to sleep, he chuckled to himself and he said, I better not go to sleep right now. I need to get home. I need to go be with my family, and I think I better be sleeping in my bed from now on. Got up and walked home, and he was met by his family, and his wife took him outside and said, you got to stop taking those naps in the barn, 'cause you don't get home on time. And we need you at home on time. Gideon smiled and chuckled and said, okay, I'm working on it. She knew that he was working on it. But at the same time, she even felt a presence that she knew that God had a plan for both Gideon and his family. That night, as they were getting ready for bed, she poked him in the arm and said, whatever God's telling you to do, you better do it. Don't question. Gideon kind of looked at her strange, but didn't say anything, because he had learned many years ago that when his wife said something to him, he needed to listen. So that next morning, he got up early and was getting his tools ready. And he looked outside and he realized that same fleece was there. Funny thing was that this was the second time that what he had said had actually come true. Scratched his head and said, well, maybe God is trying to tell me something, but I don't know about that. If it happens again, we'll see. Gideon went through that day. He had some extra things that he had to do, and he was bringing in some of the produce into the barn and set it down, and next thing he knew, he didn't mean to fall asleep, but he fell asleep. Next thing he knew, that bright light shone again. Same conversation, another stipulation. And Gideon ran home this time and told his wife what had happened and what was going on, and she looked at him, put both her hands on his shoulders and said, I'm going to say it once. No selective hearing, no selective listening. You hear what I have to say, Gideon. When God speaks, you better listen. He smiled and he said, you're right. Family went to bed that night, and Gideon decided to get up extra early to go back down to the barn that next morning. Found the fleece, found that it was exactly how God had told him. Still, he's scratching his head going, who am I? I'm not a warrior. I'm not someone that's into battle or into any of this other kind of thing. There's no way that God's calling me to do this. Little did he know that Jesus was standing right behind him. Next thing he knows is he feels a hand on his shoulder. He turns around and he sees the kind, smiling face of Jesus. Here's one thing, one question. Are you ready to do what I've asked you to do? Gideon falls on his face and says, yes, Lord. Whatever you ask, I will do. Jesus smiles and says, good. Now here's what I want you to do. before you go and you find these men of valor that will fight for me, I want you to go and I want you to destroy all your family's idols and altars to other gods. Now, Gideon knew growing up that while his mom served God, his dad had idols and altars to other gods. Now, he was scared because he knew how his dad had a huge temper and how he'd probably get beat up by his family for doing this. But Jesus put another hand on his shoulder and said, "Don't worry what they will do. You will be safe. Just go and do what I've asked you to do." Gideon walks a mile and a half over to his parents' place, and he starts to destroy the ancient altars and the ancient idols that had been worshipped at one time. Little did he know that his parents and other family members were watching from the windows of the family estate. None of them did anything because little did Gideon know that they had been visited by God as well, and that God told them that they needed to change because the nation was on its way to be changed as well, and that this was the first step to true safety and what God was going to do forever. Now, every single altar, every single idol on that land was destroyed, but Gideon felt very strange. He wasn't used to destroying things that were a part of the family for a long time, and he had a feeling that people were not going to forgive him for this. What he forgot was that no matter what happened, his family still loved him. His family still wanted him to be a part, and his family wanted a change as well. They just didn't know how to do it. Gideon walked the mile and a half back, and he didn't realize that what he had done had already been spread throughout the countryside. People were talking that he was in open rebellion. Others were talking about that this was the salvation of God that had been promised. But his family, all they could talk about was that all of a sudden a change had come over Gideon that they had never seen before. Because Gideon now had a relationship with God that was changing him forever. That next day, people from the town came to him and said, because of what you have done, here's what we want you to do for us. We want you to be a judge over us. We want you to help us with our problems. We want you to do the things that need to be done in order so that we may have justice, so that we may see mercy, so that we can have love in our families once again. Gideon smiled and said yes, and before he said yes, he made sure it was okay with his family. But as he smiled and as he said yes, he realized that this was exactly what God had told him, exactly what God was calling him to do. But little did Gideon know that next day he'd be called to something that would be more than he could imagine, more than the nation of Israel could even imagine, but the story would continue to cycle its way through history because of one message, one man, and a group of people that were too scared to even look at their shadow or to even trust and follow what God had asked them to do.